Hello, I'm Christian Lowden from Kennedy's and welcome to the second episode of the Healthcare in Conversation series. Today I'm delighted to be joined by the fantastic Zar Salih from Medwise AI and Prova Health and Tom Hester, Head of UK Healthcare from Tysers Insurance. Today we hope to talk about the evolution and practicalities of AI in healthcare. So Zar, tell us a little bit about your background.
Thanks. So I'm Zar, I'm a pharmacist by background, and more recently I work in medical technologies. So at Medwise, we've developed a search engine for clinicians to find evidence-based answers to their guideline queries at the point of care. And at Prova Health, we help other technologies to develop evidence, generate evidence to enable their products to be adopted by the healthcare community.
Fantastic, that's really interesting. And Tom, same for you?
I head up the Tysers UK healthcare team. I've been involved in healthcare for about 18 years, and ultimately our job as a broker is to support any business when it comes to the placement of their insurances. I have a real interest in technology, so this is a fascinating space for me, and I say I'm really lucky to be in a situation where I'm dealing with something so new. Most insurances have been around a very long time. But with AI and the constant involvement of it means that it's new and different and sets up a whole load of challenges.
Fantastic. My background is that I'm a defence solicitor. I typically act on behalf of clinicians. So what we've got here is quite an interesting angle that all three of us are focused on assisting the clinicians supporting their practice. So let's get right into it. Zar, I'd like to talk to you about the integration of AI into healthcare. Is it being welcomed? Is there some reticence? Is some AI more welcome than others?
Yeah, certainly. There's a huge excitement to bring AI or any automating technology into the healthcare front line. And of course there's a reticence as well because the risks have been well publicised. So with any new technology, you see a combination of early adopters and then people that are slower to adopt. But in this particular case, the risks are very well known, and people have been able to experience using large language model technology in their personal lives, recreationally, and have seen firsthand, specifically with generative AI solutions, the risks of error, and that immediate recognition of that in their sort of personal lives makes them more concerned about, how can we use this safely in healthcare if we do?
And your background is a pharmacist.
Yeah.
Have you seen it firsthand in pharmacy?
So pharmacy has, since I started practicing, has been really an innovative profession in adopting technology. So when I first came into practice, we had robotic dispensing technologies to sort of ensure consistency in the sort of movement of medication around the pharmacy, the stock control. And that was really welcome, and as a result of that, not only that but also electronic patient records, which have been which were well adopted in pharmacy environments. There is certainly an appetite, and I think pharmacists definitely have a history of being very pro technology introduction.
Tom, as a broker, are you seeing an appetite for more bespoke coverage from clinicians and providers?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly coming. We're talking to, it's funny when you think of AI in healthcare, it's everybody. It's integrated from, the NHS GP that we're going in and seeing that might be using AI for taking some record or notes or using it for, the purpose of searching for information, right the way up to sort of the more diagnostics businesses. And so, the very nature of that is meaning that more people are asking, how do I cover it? It's quite exciting for me as a broker. There's not too many, occasions in history where something so new comes along and you have to sort of find your feet. There's a couple of insurers that are really leading the way and putting AI into their wording. But the reality of insurance with anything is we need some claims, and as the claims start to come through, that will then define how we look to cover it in the future.
Yeah, and that leads me on to what I was going to touch on next. Really, is have you seen any claims, or have you seen any claims from the circles that you're involved in as well?
Yeah, great question. I haven't seen any formal claims against the technologies from an AI perspective in use of large language models, but there is a strong belief that it's coming, and that that it won't be long before someone does misuse a general purpose chatbot and potentially transmits patient identifiable details through that, or relies on a general purpose chatbot to inform or make a medical decision. But so far, it seems that clinicians have been very sensible and have recognised that these technologies are, at the mainstream level, the consumer-facing chatbots are not to be used in healthcare practices.
Thanks. And Tom?
Yeah, there's a couple that I'm aware of which I can't talk about, but the very basis of the claim, what we're seeing is where there is a conflict between the doctor and ultimately the results of the AI. As it stands, the doctor is still ultimately responsible for giving the results to a patient, depending on what the AI has come out with. So I think there is some concern. I think there will have to be some framework around it. At the moment, there doesn't appear to be any. But as I say, to the points we're making, it's something which is coming up quite rapidly, and I'm hoping that it gets sorted before there is an issue. But I think the first area that we're going to see it really is going to be around the sort of diagnostic side. But they've been using AI for a very long time, and so the fact that it kind of, to my knowledge, hasn't happened is quite quite relevant. Yeah,
in my experience, I've only come across a couple of claims. One relating to a misdiagnosis of a melanoma, and one relating to a CT imaging report, which is quite interesting because AI, some of its successes are related to imaging.
Well, in that particular example, though, where did has the claim gone through? Was the doctor held responsible? Was the AI? That's what we want to know, really, isn't it?
Where the ultimate liability and accountability lies is a question, maybe for today, maybe for another day. It's important to all three of us to know where liability sits when AI does go wrong. AI is, as I understand it, heavily regulated in the UK, particularly if it's deemed a medical device, MHRA, and probably the Consumer Protection Act. Zar, do you find the regulations helpful? Do they hinder development? What are your thoughts on that?
Regulation is certainly helpful because you as a developer, you want to protect both the healthcare professional using the software and the patient that is whose healthcare is impacted by that. So it is certainly helpful. I think what we're seeing at the moment, though, is that due to the kind of fast evolving nature of large language model technology, there has probably been a situation where the regulator has struggled to keep up with that evolution. So we know that last week a new national commission has been set up to advise the MHRA on the next steps for LLM technology, and that will that will be published next year, I believe, and will have a huge impact on technologies like Medwise and others.
Tom, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, whether you come across regulation and policy writing at all?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a great deal to sort of add on that. It's it's very much needed. It's strongly supported by the clients that I'm working with, and the next sort of 18 months is going to be a really interesting time to see where we go. There's that balance, right? Isn't there? We need the technology because it's going to speed up patient treatment and care. It's going to improve NHS waiting times potentially. Big topic. So actually, bring it on, but at the same time, it's got to be done in a safe way.
I agree. I'm a big proponent of AI in healthcare, and previously I've shared my views that I think it will become part of a modified standard of care that clinicians ultimately have to use it. So Zar, what is the particular difficulty with regulating generative AI, that particular software?
So the particular crux of this issue is that the AI is what we call non-deterministic, which means that the outputs vary with each use, and you don't get uniform outputs based on uniform inputs. So it means that there's a challenge in how it's regulated compared to other softwares that are more predictive algorithm based, and it presents a really unique challenge, which is why regulators like the FDA, EMA or the MHRA have been sort of grappling with this. So as the technology evolves, you've got to think about novel ways of evaluating. So you need to think about the technical validation of the product, and also the clinical validation. So how it's used, in practice by clinicians. Is it improving practice, making it faster, more efficient, safer? Is it operating to a gold standard? And that really needs to be. You need to think about developing continuous evidence over time, rather than just a definitive clinical trial that's sort of, rooted in a time and place, because the product, the technology moves over time. So you need a continual portfolio of evidence, really.
Do you think there's a risk, however, a danger that AI is sometimes created for the sake of AI? Do you think that sometimes the solution is shoehorned into a problem?
I think that's an issue with any, that's common with tech startups and where a developer, a pioneer, an innovator has an idea and wants to sort of launch that and implement that in workflow or in society. But ultimately, you've got to get back to the principle of, are you solving a particular problem, right? Is this, think of the use case, think of the urgent unmet need, whether that's, at the clinician level or the patient level. Look at the problem, get really, really focused and concentrate on that, and then think, is there a technology, and it may or may not be AI, is there a suitable technology that best serves and solves this problem?
Yeah, no, I agree. I quote someone I heard speak the other day, and they said there's two creators in AI. One is the clinician who's seen the problem firsthand and is trying to solve it. The other is the individual who's got a great mind and technology to build something and then trying to shoehorn, as you say, into healthcare. I guess the ideal world is we bring those two people together and create whatever it is, whether it's patient pathways that are improved by AI. I think certainly in things like long-term care of the elderly, there's an opportunity for this technology. And I know of some of my clients, they're looking at different elements of that care. Mm-hmm. But again, what I'm trying to do is bring them together and say, well, how about you guys do this really well, you guys do this really well. If you bring this together, this is a really, really positive thing. And so it's that's sometimes the challenge. It's almost too. What's the word I'm thinking of? It's too fine-tuned. It needs to be a wider piece.
I agree. If there's one piece of advice either you could give anybody who is in AI in healthcare, if they're looking to develop, or any clinician who's looking to utilise AI in their practice, what would that be?
A clinician knows their problems intimately and knows what needs addressing and where the blockers in their workflow are, what's causing frustration in their practice, and with large language models they open up so many opportunities for how you can automate workflow, through creating your own custom GPTs potentially, or specialist software built around that. Like, for example, Medwise is based on large language model technology specifically to resolve the problem of retrieving information from recognised clinical guidelines and giving you an instant answer to a question from a guideline that you can implement at the point of care in a practical way to move your patient through a pathway of care.
How do clinicians sift through the huge swathes of AI that's out there to find the right product for them, the one that they can trust as well, the one that limits risk?
Yeah, great question. So the most popular form of AI probably in use by clinicians at the moment is AVTs, ambient voice technologies, or also known as scribes, and there are upwards of 60, possibly 100 of those on the market. So how does a clinician choose? So NHS England helpfully released some guidance on that earlier this year, about the standards that to be expected of those products, whether they fall into medical device category or not, depending on how advanced they are, what they purport to do, and additional advice on how you as an organisation can take accountability for bringing that software in, what kind of training is required of your staff, compliance with things like GDPR and so on. So guidance exists, and if you're interested in exploring those new technologies, then seek out that guidance.
That's right. I suppose the question for you, Tom, is how does a clinician who wants to use it find the right policy for them?
Yeah, I mean, I say this, whoever I'm talking to, the importance is working with a broker that truly understands what you do. Insurance is incredibly complex, and when it comes to something like this, which is so new, you've got to make sure that your policy is going to react. So seek out a decent broker, make sure they understand your business, and ultimately make sure that the insurance policy that's being put in place is picking up the liability that you see. Again, that's not always easy because so much of this technology is so new. But as I say, it just has to be the number one point, and I think it gets forgotten sometimes. Seek out a decent broker, make sure you get the right policy in place, and as I say, in that process, be open, honest, give every bit of detail. And then ultimately that allows the insurers to cover future losses.
I think also healthcare professionals are very much, people that are interested in what their peers have to say and look to their peers for guidance and experience. So I think that if you're in a network with colleagues who are experimenting with AI technologies, you'll soon find out which ones are popular, which ones are working, which ones are solving problems that are common among peers. And since so many of these technologies are currently free to use, while we're still in the foothills of people working out their business models and so on, it's a great time to experiment and find what works for you, and ask yourself, is it solving your problem? And definitely look to your peers for information.
If I was to ask you to crystal ball gaze into the future, which is obviously a very difficult question because it moves so rapidly, what do you think the landscape looks like in 2 to 5 years? I think that regulation in this country, government legislation in terms of the bill is perhaps slow moving. They want to take a very holistic approach to that. The private members bill by Lord Holmes, again, is slightly slow progress. But I think we're right on the cusp of this rapidly accelerating. How do you think it looks in healthcare in 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's rapidly accelerating. I mean, if you think that ChatGPT came onto the market in November 2022, and then this time last year, so September 2024, BMJ published some data that showed that 20% of GPs have tried or were at that time using AI in some form, possibly for the most kind of low-hanging fruit administrative tasks in daily workflow, which would be an appropriate use of the technology. But if that was a year ago, you can assume that has risen since then. So where will we be in 2, 3, 5 years' time? You can only assume that trajectory is going to increase, unless the technology proves itself to have some catastrophic errors of the type that we worry about seeing. But so yeah, in terms of a crystal ball, I think there's a lot of hope on bringing in visual elements, so bringing in the ability of the models to recognise video and other visual media to inform how they're trained, so that they're not just reliant on text-based sources. And I think that could have a real impact on things like education in clinical practice. And who knows?
I don't see us necessarily relying solely on AI for diagnostics, for example, but it's certainly going to come more and more a part of day-to-day treatment. One of the things I imagine we'll be seeing in some of the technology that I've been lucky enough to see over the last sort of 6 months is I think a lot of AI will sit at the front of the initial treatment. So we turn up to A&E and AI is the first thing that, a form of AI is the first thing we see, whether that's a basic diagnosis or that's taking details. I think online GPs are going to be using it more and more, using medical devices that can take blood pressure and take some basic results. So again, giving that GP a sort of fourth dimension in effect with that appointment. So I think that's where it's going. I think it'd be quite scary to think that in 5 years' time, we're relying solely on it for diagnostics. But to Zar's point, it's moving so quickly. Anyone that's used ChatGPT since its launch knows that even a year ago, the answers coming out of it were questionable. And I know it still struggles with a few mathematical equations, but it's certainly got an enormous amount better. And if we look at innovation over the last 200 or 300 years, there's not many things have moved quite as quickly. So
I think Sam Altman describes the latest version as having a PhD standard assistant.
Yes, I saw that.
Really impressive.
And I'd describe it as still unsafe in healthcare settings. So, we've got to remind ourselves that it does produce very plausible looking, very much more coherent text than it used to, and as recently as a year ago. So don't be fooled into thinking that makes it clinically safe, because you can't guarantee that those citations come from valid evidence-based sources. It's trained on almost the entirety of the open internet. So you do need a special purpose search tool for healthcare use, whether that's something like the huge American company Open Evidence, which is used by hundreds of thousands of doctors in the US, or whether that's something like Medwise, which is a UK equivalent that's incorporating only UK and European-based guidelines for use at the point of care to answer your questions about those content sources. That's the sort of thing that you should be pointing your mind towards, how can I use this technology appropriately in a healthcare environment, and what are the solutions available?
There's a lot of food for thought here today, and I'm very grateful for both your time and grateful for the viewers at home for watching. Details of both of our guest speakers is available on the information below. Thank you.